How's it going, ladies and gentlemen? My name is RuffledRowlit, and welcome back to another video about Pokemon rumors, leaks, and news. Let's get right into it. Starting things off with this post that was shared to us by none else than, of course, Centro Leaks. And basically, he's talking about something interesting that we kind of know and don't know about, but it's about Pokemon Winds and Waves and how the game will be introducing a tweaked version of the turn-based battle system. Now, what are we talking about? Well, when you battle in Pokemon, unlike certain games, it is an RPG, so the battles are turn-based. You take a move, your opponent takes a move, you take a move, your opponent takes a move, and different things like speed affects it. However, one thing about Pokemon turn-based battles in the past, I would say literally up until Legends Arceus, was that the battles were static, as in once you go into a battle, a animation would play and you'd go into a battle like menu or screen or something like that, or a battle arena where you have to just do your turn-based stuff, but you cannot really affect anything because the battle just kind of like is static, right? The camera might move a little bit, but you cannot actually move during the battle. You can only choose what moves and animations are about to play. But if you guys have played Pokemon Legends Arceus, you would know that even during a battle, you can pick moves, but your character, you as the actual player in the game, like the character you play as, can still move around in the world and do things while your Pokemon is in the battle and while you're still choosing different attacks. And what they're saying here is that based on leaks, it's most likely based on Legend Arceus, so the upcoming games, Winds and Waves, are going to have a similar system of movement while you're battling. Not like ZA, where in ZA, like, you know, it's an action-based combat system where literally you decide moves and they happen in the moment. It's going to be turn-based again, but you're going to be able to actually move around in the world while the battle is happening instead of just, a camera rotating around, not letting you really do much while you just wait for attacks to happen, which is really cool. But also, apparently, that there's going to be multiple targeting. So basically, you're going to be able to attack more than one Pokemon at a time if there's, let's say, a herd of Pokemon or, a horde of Pokemon, whatever you want to call it, that are attacking you or in the area. You want to hit all of them. Let's say you use, I don't know, the move Surf or something, or just a move that shoots into a larger space, then you'd be able to actually do more damage and hit more of them because of the fact that there's going to be AoEs, or area of effect attacks, that can hit a larger space, similar to how they work in ZA. But again, this could change, but this was something that they were talking about, so there is that. The next thing is actually an interesting subject, but it's about an interview that was done about Pokemon Champions by the producer, an interview with the producer, Masaki Hoshino, which actually confirms some interesting stuff. We can actually read what PLDH said here in an interview, but he says that the future updates will add additional battle arenas and player-hosted tournaments, and though the mobile launch is currently their priority for Pokemon Champions, conversely, there are no plans to implement a replay feature for now. But that's not the interesting thing. We actually have an interesting theory from Sol here, who says there are a few new interviews with the producer of Pokemon Champions, and aside from a few details, I've come to a conclusion that there are some interesting stuff to learn from here. One, the most concerning and exciting thing to him is that Champs was primarily made to separate competitive turn-based battling from the main games. This was so that they can focus on other features for the main games and have the freedom to experiment with new ways to battle. So this is a big thing that I am okay with its existence, but also it creates two issues, right? On one hand, it's nice that we have like a game now, separate game, if you want to just do competitive. Unfortunately, that game, as far as I can tell from a lot of people, my first-hand experience was it's just kind of wasn't anything special, Champions, to be real with you. But for most people, what I've heard about Champions, it's just that it's kind of like whatever, you know what I mean? It's not groundbreaking, it's not really awful or amazing, it's just very mid, I think is the best way to put it, just very mid. But the existence of Champions makes it so that Game Freak, who makes all the Pokemon mainline games like Winds and Waves and Scarlet and Violet and Legends ZA and all that sort of stuff, they're not going to have to worry about competitive, right? And what I mean by this is they're not going to have to worry about balancing and, think about like why we have competitive to win with. It's because there are championships and stuff that need to be held, and there is a competitive scene of people who want to compete in Pokemon on a higher level, like in any other esport. However, if the games constantly try to add in like extravagant, crazy shit, like insanely powerful Pokemon or insanely weird mechanics that just make battling really like difficult to balance, the team ends up spending more time balancing and figuring out how the fuck do we make this work in the game versus just making a fun game, right? And I don't think that's something they want to do. I think they want to focus on just making a fun game. So what he says here is, what I got from the interview was essentially that Champions was made because people like me are afraid that the classic turn-based battles will be lost while Game Freak wants to experiment with new things. Ultimately, this sucks for some people because, yes, that's him, he's talking about himself, but also competitive Pokemon isn't him either. He wants to be able to do classic turn-based single battles against NPC gym leaders and use any Pokemon he wants on his team, which I agree, I do like that aspect, but I am... Unlike Soul, I do personally, I think a lot of you guys wouldn't mind a bit of a twist, a little bit of a, you know, like mix it up a little bit, do some crazy stuff. Not in the sense of like, just give us an overpowered Pokemon, because that's not fun. But like, mix it up a little bit, you know, make a gym battle into a triple battle, or make a gym battle where, like, think about Ash's journey work. Like, realistically, how many gym leaders did Ash actually beat versus how many did he sort of bullshit his way to a badge, you know what I mean? So make it interesting, make it fun, you know? But I think more important thing here is that this just allows Game Freak to work on the games more and make better features without having to worry about balancing as much. And also here, the way the producer speaks about developing champs and the speed of releasing things makes me confident that they won't have Z-moves or Dynamax ready for years. I doubt they'll even get Terra done by next year. That plus the Winds and Waves gimmick and the new Gen 10 Pokemon. So yeah, it's probably gonna take a while before they get all that done. It's gonna take forever, I'm gonna be honest. It's definitely intriguing, but again, that's just one of the things. Also, Eclipse has something to say about the Winds and Waves turn-based system. He says they try to implement moves that morph the environment visually, which, see, this is what I mean. How would they do something like that? Like, think about a move in Pokemon that literally changes how the space around you looks like. Like, imagine a literal move, like, think of like earthbending or something from like Avatar, right? The Last Airbender. Imagine how earthbending literally lifts a piece of ground, like, you know, earth out of the ground. Now imagine if you use something like Rock Smash and the actual ground burst up when the Pokemon smashes, you know, into the ground, or Rock Blast is actually like a Pokemon literally lifting a piece of rock out of the ground, leaving a hole in the ground where it lifted the rock up, and then throwing that bitch. You get what I'm saying? Like, I can see so much potential with this kind of stuff, but imagine now having to, you know, implement things like that. I mean, this is really small scale stuff. I'm just giving you a really tidbit of an idea, but like I'm expecting this to be much larger in scale than what I'm saying. I'm not saying it's gonna even be there, but the concept would be larger in scale than my stupid little idea. But imagine having to then implement some of those things or some of those concepts into Champions or future games or whatever else, or maybe even having to balance that. How do you do it in case you're doing something like that? How do you make it work in a competitive setting? How does that function if, let's say, you have to do a Wi-Fi battle and you use one of these, you know, let's say moves that morphs the environment? How does that function, right? Like, how does that leave the world impacted? You know, how does that work? I don't know. It's, again, there's ways to do it, but we'll see. And also, Eclipse did say tried to implement moves like this, so there's no guarantee they will be in there. We'll have to wait and see. Also, there's a translation of Nintendo president Shuntaro Furukawa talking to their investors about Pokemon, and there's some interesting stuff to learn from here, saying, for Pokemon-related titles, Fire Red Leaf Green, released as a download-only title in February, together had global cumulative sale-through of more than 4 million units in the first 6 weeks, and Pokemon Pokopia, released in March, had a global cumulative sell-through exceeding 4 million units in the first 5 weeks. This year is also the 30th anniversary of the release of Pokemon Red and Green, and the Pokemon IP has become increasingly popular around the world and is a very strong position, not only for the Pokemon, for the video games, but also for the card game, mobile apps, and other areas of business. We are grateful for the Pokemon Pokopia, which was released as a Nintendo Switch 2 title as part of the 30th anniversary, is driving hardware sales, and we hope to see it become a new evergreen title for Nintendo Switch 2 with a long sale life. In addition, Pokemon Winds and Waves will be released in 2027. Going forward, we'll be continuing to work with the Pokemon Company to encourage consumers playing Pokemon titles to transition to Switch 2. So yeah, clearly the Pokemon is literally like, it's a big reason why Pokemon still like even gets mainline games, is literally just to sell Nintendo consoles. Like, realistically, because you have to understand, Pokemon already makes way more money from just cards and merch. Like, Pokemon toys make more money than any of the video games. Actually, I think combined, if you take all the video games combined, it doesn't even come close to how much they make from just like a year or two of like merch sales. Like, merchandise from Pokemon sells way more. Actually, this goes for everything. Whether it's a cartoon, an anime, a movie, doesn't really matter. Usually the merchandise is where you make most of your money. You're gonna make way more there of a profit margin versus like you know, the actual product, like, you know, or the actual franchise or thing that it's from. Usually that's always the case, which is, you know, it is what it is. It's just consumerism. What can you do? But either way. Now, next up, we have an actual theory here from none else than Soul Silver Art, and here is what he has to talk about. So you guys may know that a bunch of Pokemon games did get leaked, but some of the stuff we do not know about, for example, is Unova. So he has to say, maybe the craziest thing about the leaked document showing all of Game Freak's planned games for the next 5 years is that there are no Gen 5 or even Gen 2 remakes revisited planned in Generation 10, unless there is a remake that is completely outsourced or made by a third-party development team, possibly. Ilka, I guess. According to the remake release patterns, most Pokemon fans believe Gen 5 remakes would be in Generation 10, which that's what the pattern usually would follow, but as we have learned recently, patterns don't really matter with Pokemon releases anymore. Gen 4 remakes were in Gen 8, etc. But right now, it looks like the schedule is pretty full, and Gen 5 remakes won't happen until we're in Generation 11, if at all. Don't get me started on Johto. It will have been almost 20 years since we've come back there, and even more if Seed doesn't happen. If you don't know Seed is the Pokemon MMO game that's supposed to be in development still. Like, if you don't know, an MMO is a multiplayer, massively online game. It's like an open world type thing where you have a bunch of other people you can interact with, trade with, etc. It's a multiplayer game where you see other people and interact with the people, and etc. And Seed, or Project Seed, is supposed to be a game that's supposed to essentially take Kanto, Johto, Hoenn, and Sinnoh, and I think Kitakami, if I'm not mistaken, put them all into one game, into one giant video game, right? And it was supposed to be an MMO where you get to play with other people and stuff like that and go back to those regions. So yeah, and that's just basically what Project Seed is. But he says, this is the only reason that makes me think that a Legends Galar game could have changed into a Legends Unova or Johto. I don't think this is the case, but it would make a lot of sense, especially if Legends games are the new way of doing Pokemon remake games. Lastly, the sales of Pokemon remakes are still speaking for themselves. True Pokemon remakes have actually made more than Legends games so far, and we see how well even just ports of Fire Red and Leaf Green are doing. So why wait until after 2030 to make more Pokemon remakes? They might be missing the boat. Now, I'll be real with you. I am pretty certain that there is Gen 5 remakes, maybe not Gen 2, but definitely a Gen 5 remake being worked on. As much as Gen 5 is kind of the dumbest generation to remake, I'm going to be real with you, and there is a reason why. Not because Gen 5 is bad or whatever, not that I don't necessarily hold like a high esteem personally for Generation 5 or Unova, mostly because that's kind of the moment in my life where I tuned out of Pokemon the most, and then came back with like Hoenn being re-released with Oras. But we have to be real here. Black and White and Unova was the low point of Pokemon. Actually, I think it was the lowest point of Pokemon as a franchise. It was when the franchise had the least amount of interest, people were losing faith, and Black and White are the worst selling Pokemon franchise new gen games ever to release. If you compare it to all the other games, we actually look up the list real quick. Pokemon main game sales, and we actually find the exact numbers here of what sold the most, right? If we just look at everything. So here is a list, and again, it's not like super updated, it's 2 years old, so just keep that in mind. But of course, any of the games from like, you know, let's say everything before the Switch 1 came out, that's set in stone. Those games are not getting any more releases or games being produced. So of course, that's what you see is what you get. But here's the sales numbers, and you will notice something interesting, right? So when you look at the new gen games, as in when I say new gen, I mean games that were start of a new generation. If we don't count Red, Green, and Blue, which literally were the first ones, the highest ones were actually Sword and Shield and Scarlet and Violet, which is crazy. That's insane. Then it's Gold and Silver, which makes sense, the second generation. Diamond and Pearl is pretty high. X and Y is pretty high. Sun and Moon is pretty high. Ruby and Sapphire is pretty high. And then there's Black and White. Now, everything else below Black and White here are not new gen games. Those are games that came out during a generation or are remakes. For example, Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, that's a remake game. That's a reimagining of Pokemon Yellow. Brilliant Diamond Shining Pearl, that's a remake of Diamond and Pearl, which sold 17.6 million copies. Legends Arceus, that is a spin-off. Well, it's not really a spin-off. It's a mainline game, but it's sort of like its own thing, right? It's not a new generation, and it's not a remake. It's kind of a new thing. Yellow was a third version, similar to Emerald or Crystal, right? Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire, remake games, 14.6 million. Heart Gold Soul Silver, remake games, 12.7 million. Fire Red Leaf Green, 12 million, plus the 4 million that they just got from that gosh darn Switch port, which also puts them at a pretty high number. Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, those were second versions, or third versions, I guess, you know, if you want to call it that. Black and White 2, also third versions. Platinum, Emerald, Crystal, all were third version games. My point is, if you look at all the generational games, generational as in red, blue, you know, green, yellow, actually red, blue, gold, silver, ruby, sapphire. Actually, wait, where's ruby, sapphire here? It's right there, 16.2. Right, my main point is, they are the lowest selling. Is it a huge margin between them and ruby and sapphire? About 1 million. So it's not the end of the world, but you have to realize it is still the worst performing ones if you take it and encapsulate it like in a full thing. However, you did have Black and White 2, which had the most sales out of like almost out of these, like, you know, third versions, not counting, I guess, yellow, because that's the best selling one. But like the main point is that they were the worst selling games. So there is always going to be that kind of feeling of like, is it worth remaking? I think there is, personally. I think there's a reason to remake Black and White, because 15.6 million copies is still an entire generation of people that grew up with those games and loved them. I personally would not mind to see them return. However, will they do it? Yes. Yes, I think so. Black and White will get remade. Don't even worry about it. It's going to happen. I just think the reason that we haven't seen any leaks about it, about Unova being remade inside of that giant leaked file, is literally specifically because the game is being made by a different studio. I think a different studio is working on it, and it's just being worked on somewhere else, whether it's Ilka or a Pokemon Works or whatever it's called. It's probably being worked on over there, so that's why we haven't seen shit about it. Hence, you know, the lack of knowledge about it and why it feels like it's not even going to happen. So there's that. But yeah, it is pretty much that. There's not really much else I can say. Also, another thought here from Loris Kitty, who says, in an interview, the producer of Pokemon Champions stated that one of the main reasons of the game's existence is to keep the classic turn-based battles going in case they stop appearing in the main games, which makes a lot of people, again, like myself, wonder, does this mean we're going to get a different battle system? Are they going to change it? How much are they going to change it? Maybe not for Winds and Waves, but down the line, right? That's the big question. Also, according to Light, Pokemon Winds and Waves will introduce a new system with a constantly evolving world. Basically, a world built to expand without limits, a strong focus on weather systems, which makes sense, Winds and Waves, it's natural, you know, how would you even refer to it as? It's natural occurrences, right? So weather systems, wind, oceans, natural forces, there it is. And then exploration-driven gameplay across islands and open environments, and a structure closer to an open-world MMO than a traditional linear route. Note some of these elements may still change during development, so we'll see how that turns out. We'll see how it ends up, but it's all up for debate at this moment. Also, according to Light, apparently in Pokemon Winds and Waves, there will be apparently be a feature similar to the Path of Legends from Scarlet and Violet, which you guys may remember, the Path of Legend, where you gotta defeat the big legendary, sorry, not legendary, the freaking Titan Pokemon. You gotta beat those fellas, and then you gotta get the different Herba Mystica to make the sandwich. So, as you know, the bosses in Scarlet and Violet were called the Titans. In Winds and Waves, they are supposedly called Nushi, a Japanese term that roughly means spiritual guardians or guardian beings. This name was reportedly found internally in the Terra Leak, and the current types are said to be electric, bug, water, dragon, and ground. Note this, since this information comes from the Terra Leak, some details may still have changed during development. So, very, very highly likely and possible. But yeah, I think that pretty much summarized everything we had to talk about in this video, I think at least. But yeah, again, I'd love to know your thoughts and opinions. If I missed anything, I don't think I did. I think we've gone through most of the important stuff that we had to cover. There's still some theories and stuff. We'll cover that in a different video. But yeah, that's going to be it for today. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one. Peace.